Hello. Okay, we're live right now. Oh, it is episode 77. You know, 7 is a really important number for Chinese. You know why? Just search. Just search. Okay, let's continue with our book. The creature comes from Europe. Yeah, it comes from Europe. Who were these private investors? Their names do not appear in public literature, but we can certain they included the congressmen, senators, and their associates who engineered the charter. But there is an interesting line in Garber's text that hints at another dimension to see composition of this group on pages 72 of Money. Whence it came, where it went, it states factly, foreigners could own shares but not vote them. Foreigners could own shares but not vote them. What the story is hidden behind that innocuous cures cure cure cures innocuous innocuous statement. The blunt reality is that the Rothschilds banking dynasty in Europe was the dominant force, both financially and politically, in the formation of the Bank of the United States. Biographer Derek Wilson explained, the Bank of the United States. Over the years since N.M. Rothschild, the Manchester textile manufacturer, had bought cotton from the southern states. Rothschilds had developed heavy American commitments. Northern had made loans to various states of the Union, had been for a time the official European banker for the US government, and was pledged supporter to the Bank of the United States. Godworth Mayer, in his History of the Great American Fortunes, is more pointed. He says, under the surface, the Rothschilds long had a powerful influence in dictating American financial laws. The law records show that they were the power in the old Bank of the United States. The Rothschilds, therefore, were not merely investors nor just an important power. They were the power behind the Bank of the United States. The significance of the Rothschild power in American finance and politics was the subject of intensive comment in a previous section, so there's no need to cover that ground again. It is important here, however, to at least make a mental note of the fact that the creature from Journeyland is descended from a species that is not native to the land. Uh-huh. Oh my goodness. 不仅是投资者，也不仅是一个重要者，他们是背后的。这前面已经实现了广泛的全知。然而，重要的是，这里要记住一个事实，即的祖先并非原生生物。The judges, therefore, were not merely investors nor just an important power. They were the power behind the Bank of the United States. The significance of such power in American finance and politics were the subject of extensive comments in a previous section, so there's no need to cover that ground again. It's important here, however, to at least make a mental note of the fact that, make a mental note. The creature from JEKYLL is descend 下来降临降生后移 descend not descended from a species that is not native to this island. Inflation all over again. From the beginning, our primary purpose of the bank was to create money for the federal government. Money for private sector was strictly secondary. That was made clear by the fact that the maximum rate of interest it was allowed to charge was 6%. That made it impractical to make loans to anyone except the federal government and a few large primary rate borrowers, and the government wasted no time putting its new central bank mechanism to work, having invested 2 million at the start. It converted that into 8.2 million borrowed within the next 5 years, which means that 62 million was created specially for this use. Another familiar with the history of money as outlined in previous section could easily write the following paragraph. The creation of millions of new fractional reserve dollars, which the government pushed into the economy through spending program, caused an imbalance between the supply of money and the supply of goods and services. Prices appear to go up as the relative value of the dollar went down. In that time, in that same 5 years period, wholesale prices rose by 72%, which is another way of saying that 72 of every thing people had saved in the form of money was quietly confiscated by the government through the hidden tax called inflation, the same inflation, in fact, that previously had plunged plague. Oh, plague. The colonists now return to the plague, the new generation. This time, instead of being caused by printing press money, it was fractional reserve money. The cogs that linked the two mechanisms together and caused them to function as one was federal debt. It was federal debt that allowed the political and monetary scientists to violate the intent of the founding fathers. And it was this same federal debt that prompted Jefferson to exclaim, I wish it were possible to obtain a single amendment to our Constitution. I'll be willing to depend on that. alone for the reduction of the administration of working to the general principle of the Constitution. I mean, additional article, taking from the federal government their power of borrowing. Like so many things in the real world, the Bank of the United States was mixture of evil with some good. It certainly was not all bad. In colonial times, the state governments printed as much paper money as they pleased, and the loss of purchasing power was in many cases total. Bank, the bank, on the other hand, was required to maintain some gold and specie as a base of its pyramid of money, even though it was an inverted pyramid 金字塔 pyramid with reserves being smaller than the quantity of banknotes. It still represents a boundary to just how far the money supply could be expanded, and that was good. Furthermore, it is apparent that the bank's directors were imbued with a certain amount of enlightened self-interest in that they actually wanted to keep the creation of new money within some kind of control. They could profit from the central bank mechanism only as so long as the economy as a whole was productive enough to support it. They did not want to kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. So, like their counterparts in the Federal Reserve System of our modern day, they spoke the language of restraint and, in a few instances, even acted with restraint as well. Furthermore,消费者当然呢也怀着一定开明的自立之心，他们实际上希望将新货币创造更在某种范围内，他们只有在以真正要价才能生存获利。整体经济生产力足以支撑中央要求的人，他们不想杀死那人。因此，就像现代人民主义中的同行一样，他们说着克制化日益，在少数情况下采取克制的行动。Furthermore, it is apparent that the bank's directors were imbued with certain amount of enlightened self-interest. Imbued, 充满怀有 a certain amount of enlightened self-interest, 利己与长远的考虑。In that they actually wanted to keep the creation of new money within some kind of control. They could prefer from central bank mechanism only so long as the economy as a whole was productive enough to support it. They didn't want to kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. So, like their counterparts in the federal system of our modern day, they spoke the language of restraint and, in a few instances, even acted with restraints as well. Wildcat banks. For example, it was during this period that wildcat banks began to flourish. Flourish. They were given that name not because they were untamed, although that would have been another good reason to do so, but because they were located in areas so remote in the frontier that it was said their only customers were wildcats. Wildcat banks were not noted for the meticulous accounting or business practices. Like all banks at the time, they were required to keep a certain portion of their deposits on hand in the form of gold or silver coin to engender public confidence in their faithfulness to that obligation. It was common practice to keep the vault door open so a keg or two of gold coins could be viewed during business hours, not altogether different from the modern practice of financial institutions advertising how many billions in assets they hold, but never mention the size of their liabilities. The wildcatters, however, were not reluctant to sprinkle a few precious metal coins over the top of nails and let that take care of public relations. In some cases, a state examiner would from bank to bank to check the results. The goal would arrive only a few minutes ahead of them, having been rushed from the vault. All bank privileges are audited. OK，我的天呐，他也会跟中国检查那个什么，检查仓库一样，检查那个粮仓一样，开始捧我。他根本并不是因为他不受约束，境外人啊，因为他们编辑片据说他们唯一服务就是野猫，野猫银行人家的会计制度上的人，而是当其他银行一样，他被要求以经营行一定比例存款准备金，为了让公众去履行这一业务，众都产生信心。常见的做法是在营业时间打开金库里边可以看到一两桶金币，所以现在从不提他们负债的做法太大不同。然而，野猫银行就并不介意在钉子上撒上一些贵金属硬币，以此来处理东西。在某些情况下，当审计员从一家银行的拿着为黄金汇才能到金的，这是从之前审计过的银行经过这样搬过来。For example, it was during the period that wildcat banks began to flourish. They were given the name not because they were untamed 约束野性的 untamed. They were located in areas so remote. The frontier that was said the only customer was wildcats. Wildcat banks were not noted for meticulous accounting or business practice. Like all banks at that time, they were required to keep a certain portion of the deposits on hand in the form of gold or silver coin to engender 导致使某人 to engender a sense of responsibility in somebody 产生这个 public confidence in their faithfulness to the obligation. It was common practice to keep the vault door open so a keg or two of gold coins could be viewed during business hours, not altogether different from the modern practice of financial institutions advertising how many billions in assets they hold, but never mention the size of their liabilities. The wildcatters, however, were not reluctant reluctant, 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 reluctant to sprinkle a few precious metal coins, precious metal, over the top of nails, unless that they care of public relations. In some cases, as state inventors were from bank to bank to check the reserves, the gold revenue firms had them had been rushed from the vault of bank previous audited. The point is that the Bank of the United States was able to place considerable restraint upon the practice of all banks, both wealthy and urban. It did this simply by refusing to accept the notes of any other bank unless it had a reputation for redeeming those notes in specie on demand. The public reacted accordingly. If the notes were not good enough for the Bank of the United States, they were not good enough for them either. This served as an indirect force of moderation that affected all banks of that time. And that too was good. Some historians have said that the bank was a positive force in yet another way. Galbraith, for example, writes admiringly. On occasion, the Bank of the United States came to the assistance of good state banks that were being besieged by their note holders or other creditors. So, besides enforcing restraint, it served also as lender of last resort or lender of last resort. Thus, in its short span of life, it went far to perceive and develop the basic regulatory functions of a central bank. On occasion, 在某些情况下，美国银行会向那些州银行提供援助，因此除了实施之外，还充当了最后贷款人员。因此，在其短暂统治中，很大程度上感知并发展了中央银行的基本occasion. The Bank of the United States came to the assistance of good state banks that were being besieged by note holders or other creditors. Besieged. So, besides enforcing restraint, it served as the lender of last resort. Thus, in short span of life, and far to perceive and develop the basic regulatory function of central bank. One who is less enamored who is less enamored with the idea of a central bank would be tempted to ask, if those state banks were so good, why did they need assistance in keeping faith with their depositors? The whole idea of lender of last resort, which is accepted as scared dogma today, 信条、教义 dogma. Dogma today is based on the assumption that it's perfectly acceptable for the entire bank system to be fraudulent. It is assumed that any single bank or cluster of banks could at any time become seized by their noteholders or other creditors. Therefore, it's prudent prudent to have central bank to take what meager reserves there are within the system and rush them from bank to bank, if not minutes before the examiner arrives, at least before the customers do. As for the much talked about restraint exercised over other banks, it's not unreasonable to think that the same effort would have developed even without the presence of a government bank. If the free market had been left to operate, it is certain that, before long, one or more banks would gain a deserved reputation for honesty and full faith with their depositors. They would become the most popular bank and therefore the most prosperous. In order to accomplish this, however, they would have to reject the worthless notes of other banks. The public would react as expected, and even the most unscrupulous banks would have to toe the line if they wanted to survive. Moderation would be forced on the interbank system as a result to open competition within a free market. To assume that only a federally chartered central bank could have brought moderation into the monetary system is to believe that only politicians, bureaucrats, and agents of government can act with integrity, a shaky notion at best. Shake, shaky notion at best. An instrument of less murder, that's good. 这个那些州立银行为什么他们还需要帮助才能对准保证金？最后贷款人的整个理念如今被视为神圣的教条，其基础是假设整个银行里存在欺诈是完全可以接受的。而且任何一件都可能随时受到持牌人的因此，拥有一个中央银行是谨慎，它可以将体系内微薄的储备金从一家银行伸展，即使不是神元到钱，也需要在够到达之前。OK。这些人们接到对其他人津津乐道的对其他银行实施的约束，认为即使没有政府银行存在，它也会产生影响，这并非不合理。如果自由市场得以运作，可以肯定的是，不久之后，一家或多家银行将因其诚实和对储户的出信而引的应的人，他们将成为最欢迎，也是因此最欢迎。然而，为了实现这一点，他们必须拒绝其他银行毫无价值的纸币，公众会做出预期的反应。即使最有苏击的银行如果想生存，也必须遵守规则。基于自由市场内的公开竞争，整个银行体系将被迫保持秩序。认为只有联邦特许的中央银行才能将节制带入货币体系，就是认为只有政治家、官僚就才能一生，这充其量是一个站不住脚的观点。对了， As for the much talked about restraint exercised over other banks, it is not unreasonable to think that this some effort would have developed even without the presence of a government. If the free market had been left to operate, it is certain that before long, one more bank would gain a deserved reputation of honesty and forfeit with their deposits. Reputation, 名声 reputation. The deposits, they would become the most popular banks and therefore the most prosperous. Prosperous. Pro, pro, prosperous. In order to accomplish this, however, they would have to reject the worstliness of another bank. The public would react as expected, and even the most unscrupulous bank, unscrupulous, scrupulous bank scrupulous 不走手段 would have to toe the line if they wanted to survive. Moderation, 节制缓和 Moderation would be forced on the entire bank system as a result of open competition within a free market. To assume that only Federal Reserve Bank could have brought moderation into the monetary system is to believe that only politicians, brokers, and agents of government can act with integrity. A shaking note at best. A shaking notion at best. Act as with integrity. Integrity. An instrument of plutocracy. The war. Okay, I think that's all for today. 最后一段说得很清楚，政治家在操弄，其实自由经济 （free market） 是吧？自由市场经济的话，它自动会调节。但是政府呢，是吧？总是要在中间捣乱，以显示政府的能力，是吧？要发挥它的影响力，要发挥它的作用。其实说白了就是要薅羊毛。Okay, I think that's all for today. 335. Okay, I think that's all for today. So thank you. Have a good day. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.